100 years ago, your chances of living to 70 or 80 were very slim indeed. People of all ages died from conditions and diseases we hardly hear of today. What's changed? Obviously, medical science and the development of antibiotics like penicillin have a lot to do with it. But just as important are things like good sewerage systems and everyone's growing awareness of health matters. The concern today about the food we eat, the idea that some foods can endanger your health, is a continuation of that trend. After all, if a little pill like this can kill or cure you, what can this big mystery bag do? So today, if you're in the food business, you're really in the health business, and quite right too. It's not a fad. Worrying about fats, genetically modified foods, better hygiene has brought terrific improvements to our lives. The new food safety systems we're concerned with here are just another step towards longer, healthier lives for everyone. That's why, if you work in a bakery, your boss has spent an enormous amount of time and effort preparing your food safety program. It's an essential part of your job to put that program into operation and keep it operating. If you don't, you place yourself, your workmates, your customers and your employer in grave danger. These people's health and security are your responsibility. Before we get into some details, let's take a look at what safety means. It means avoiding hazards. Take, for example, the ingredients of meat pies. Firstly, you have the pastry, which is made up of flour, water, and a fat of some description. Inside you have meat and a variety of other possible fillers like vegetables, herbs, and spices. Then we have these other optional ingredients that can and do turn up in your typical meat pie. Here we have some wire, a little indigestible. A screw to really exercise your teeth. A little bit of wrapping. Some additional protein here. A lovely decorative touch. This, oh, I hope they're feeling better now. And this is tasty and appetizing. If you're a dung beetle. Mouse. And another decorative touch. Nail polish. An attractive shade made up of some fascinating and very lively chemicals. Here's from a pastry brush. This is the biggie. That smear could contain germs, millions of them, enough to give dozens of people upset stomachs, vomiting, cramps, diarrhea, or worse. This one is even more interesting. For chemists, a powerful cleaning fluid. How much to make you feel bad? It's not worth investigating. The aim of your food safety program is to keep these hazards out of the food. But there's far more to it than that. You have to be able to prove at all times that you've taken every possible measure to keep them out. If you can't prove it, then another hazard rears its head. You're out of a job. And so is everyone else here. Kaboom. In the end, the law can see to it that the business is closed down. You don't want that on your head, so as well as operating safely, you've got to keep records to show that you're operating safely. Now, for the purpose of these records, food hazards are placed in three main classes: physical, chemical, and microbiological. Other common physical hazards include glass, slivers of fingernail, and strands of hair. Among more common chemical hazards are cleaning solutions, soap, you know, that gunk in soap pads, and paint. The most common biological contaminants include bacteria, viruses, parasites such as insects and maggots, and fungi like mold and yeasts. Some molds are fatal, so they should all be considered dangerous. There are two other classes of hazard: procedural and training. We don't have to worry about them, do we? But 90% of all foodborne illnesses come from biological hazards, so we better look at them in a little more detail. In this lab, they grow bacteria for teaching and experimental purposes. To really get them thriving, the bacteria are placed in a nourishing jelly similar to the stuff in meat pies. In fact, pies would do just about as well. Bacteria love any high-protein food: eggs, milk, meat, seafood, rice, even some salads. These cultures, as they're called, are kept at a nice, warm sort of room temperature. In these conditions, the bacteria are comfortable and have plenty of nourishment and get on with their main hobby, which is sex. Off they go. The culture grows. These conditions are ideal, but bacteria also thrive in little cultures on your skin, in cuts and scratches, in your nose, under fingernails and other parts of your body, and wherever the temperature is right and there's some food. A spot of moisture or whatever on the bench top, a drop of blood on the floor. They're pretty easy to please. But the cooler the temperature, the slower they grow. Normal cold doesn't kill them, it just slows them down. Heat them up to boiling point for a while and you will kill them. But some bacteria produce poisons that remain even when the germs themselves are dead, so heat won't always get rid of the danger. The food they're in remains poisonous. Of course, you can also kill bacteria with chemicals like germicides and disinfectants. But as the chemicals are not too appetizing to us either, they're not much use in food. A large amount of sugar, salt or acid like vinegar will keep most nasties under control. That's why pickles and jams are usually pretty safe. But the main way to control bacteria is with heat and cold, and by keeping them away. Above 65 degrees Celsius, bacteria will die. Simple as that. They won't all die at once, and the ones that survive the longest will breed as soon as the temperature drops. So the longer the heating and the more intense, the more thorough the job. Below 4 degrees Celsius, bacteria virtually stop growing altogether. But that doesn't mean they're dead. You have to freeze them much colder and much longer to do that, which unfortunately would ruin most bakery foods. So up to 4 degrees is a pretty good storage temperature with no real danger of bacterial growth for a few days. Between 4 degrees and 65 degrees is the danger zone. That's when bacteria, like people, are most comfortable. 4 degrees and 65 degrees. Remember those two numbers. But of course, controlling bacteria is not nearly as good as keeping them away altogether. So let's look at that. Unless you live in a surgical theatre, you're gathering and breeding germs the whole time. Obviously, most of them are harmless, at least to you, but you don't want them at work, so you should arrive there as clean as possible. Call in if you're unwell with a cold, flu, or any infection. There's a policy on all this in your safety program. If you're all right, once you're at work, you should change into your work gear in a clean area, avoiding getting your work gear in contact with anything that might be dirty. With all the dogs and their products around, shoes are particularly dangerous. If you live in the country, there's more than dogs to worry about, so you've got to be especially careful about your footwear. Your safety program will also have a rule on jewellery. Have you ever wondered how hair grows on your skin, say your arms or your eyebrows, without getting any longer? It simply falls out. Same from your head, but more so. All of us shed hair at an incredible rate, some more incredible than others. Keep all of it out of the way. Your hair, your skin, your mouth and nose, and of course your, let us say, your private parts are the danger areas for bacterial growth. So when you're working with food, there should be no contact between those areas and your hands. That means you have to wash your hands regularly, always after visiting the restroom, even if you haven't used the toilet. You don't know who's been there before you. Scientists have found that people typically have 1 million pathogenic bacteria, ones that can make you sick, on their hands and beneath their fingernails. That's normal. Give those a chance to breed here or in a warm pie or in a sandwich for a few hours and you can see what we're up against. So get ready. Check that there's enough antibacterial hand detergent, a nail brush and disposable paper hand towels at the hand sink. Run the water until it's good and warm. The hand basin water should be set at that level and wet your hands. It's the water that removes the germs. The detergent just loosens them. Put a good ½ teaspoon of detergent on the brush, enough for a good lather. Holding the brush up like this means the water can flush away the bugs into the sink, not back onto your hands. Don't brush too hard. Do the whole thing again, and this is the first proper wash of the day. Now at your palms. About the same amount of detergent. Make sure you wash between your fingers. Work up your arms. If you're handling dough or making salads, you should wash up to your shirt sleeves. Rinse thoroughly. This is where you're actually getting rid of the nasties. As I said, the lathering has just loosened them. The drying is just as important as the washing. This wipe gets rid of as many germs as the wash. What's more, bacteria love damp, and they'll breed back in no time on warm, clammy hands. Again, do a thorough job. Paper wipes are always clean. If you've got a good linen roller towel, make sure it's working according to the book with plenty of clean surface presented at each pull. A good double hand wash, carried out according to the procedure in your food safety manual, takes no more than 30 or 40 seconds. That's nothing really. It's all here. That's one of the most important procedures to get right. Why not use gloves, incidentally? Scientists have found that in food handling, slightly used gloves are actually less hygienic than recently cleaned and dried hands. But note that recently. Gloves will keep your hands clean all right, but they're worse than fingers at carrying bugs around onto the food. While we're talking about hands, remember that this is not for your hands. They're handy for handling hot utensils, for emergency wiping, say a hot spill on your hands. But they tend to get pretty dirty, and they're not for wiping either your hands or any work surface ever. Of course, there's another way bacteria and other hazards can sneak into your bakery. That's here. Your employer will have checked that all deliveries come from reliable suppliers with their own food safety procedures. But you've got to keep an eye on them. Everyone can make mistakes. All deliveries must be checked for biological, physical and chemical hazards. With raw meat, for example, you've got to check that the containers have fitted lids or that the meat's in clean plastic liners properly sealed. Check the temperature. Chilled meat must be no more than 4 degrees, one of the magic numbers. Have a look at it. The meat must be clean and be free of contamination. Check the colour. The meat should be red and the fat should be white. If it's yellowish, it's off. And check the packing slip. There should be a batch number or a packed on date or a use by date. An unreadable packing slip is sufficient reason to reject the delivery. If there's any problem, the supplier must be able to run a check on the whole batch or day's work, and you need the packing slip references to do that. Run through the checklist with every delivery. There are other rules you will have for meat. Chilled meat should have virtually no smell. A slimy feel indicates bacteria at work. Remember how vital record keeping is. You should have a checklist for every type of delivery, flour, milk products and so on. Make sure they're always available and always used. Never accept goods with torn or damaged packaging. Never. But even undamaged packaging can be a problem. It seems that this butter has picked up a strong taint. It's been stacked near some onions during delivery. Out it goes. If you come across any food in storage at any time that's unusable, the first thing is to clearly identify and mark it and move it away from any good stuff. Never use the common large bold X. Write unsafe on it, large and clear, so there can't be any confusion. Or you can buy specially designed stickers for this purpose. See about getting some. Any confusion that arises with unsafe food would make the entire safety program invalid. The next thing, of course, is to get rid of it as soon as possible. Your documentation means that you can let the supplier or manufacturer know if it's their fault. And you've got to get that underway as soon as possible too. Then you've got to find out how you got unsafe food in there in the first place. With the records you keep, you should be able to pin down exactly how, when and where the mistake was made and who blew it. Then, of course, you've got to make sure that mistake can't happen again. Every supply, everything you use, should be covered in the safety program. A flow plan for inward goods with the potential hazards to check for when it arrives and when you put it in storage. After checking and accepting food, it must be properly stored right away. Chilled meat has to remain chilled, of course, and go straight into the chiller. And what temperature should the chiller be? No more than 4 degrees, what else? Keeping a chiller in the safe zone calls for constant care. The walls that keep the cold in will also keep the warmth in.